Hey everybody, Brian Boyle here and welcome to episode 146 of The Mesh Tongue. Today is a new day and it is good. It's been a good day, so hopefully you are having a fantastic day. Hey, if you've got questions, comments, send those to me at Brian, B-R-I-A-N, at company, the number 5k.com. For those that are new to this and you haven't seen this before, I try and do these on a daily basis. There are a few days that that I don't stress over things and I don't get to it, but for the most part, we've been on a pretty consistent basis. I think I've missed a couple days. It is what it is, it's life. So I don't get stressed over things too easily. It's it's a learning curve. And if you've got those questions, comments, send them to me. I'll be happy to help you out. If you've got any questions specifically that I'll try and answer them directly to you. If I think that they're a general basis, I'll make a video of it. So here we go. Today I want to talk to you about lower cross syndrome. I've alluded to this in some of my hip flexor videos, kind of talked about some things, talked about this also in the low back video, but actually specifically looking for somebody saying, hey, lower cross syndrome or kind of this cross pattern in the lower pelvis, this is for you. Now, what does this lower cross actually mean? Now, what it means is that we've got tightness in the hip flexors. Hip flexors come from the proximal thigh, come up into the inside of the pelvis and attach into the front of the spine. We'll get this tightness in that hip flexor. That's going to be responsible for lifting the leg with running. What we'll do is then we'll get weakness in the lower abdomen. When we get tightness from the hip flexor, you'll also get tightness across the low back, and then you'll get weak in the glutes. Now, it looks like this cross pattern. When you have this, it can happen on one side or both sides. Quite oftentimes we see this when runners sit all day at a desk, whether at school or at the office, or if they're in a truck or forklift or whatever your work du jour is, okay? And from sitting in an extended period of posture where the hip flexors are just compressed and the legs are up, when you go to extend, they become now tight. So the tightness causes the tightness in the low back, which then also causes the muscles on the opposite sides. So if you think about the opposite sides, so we've got this tightness, this side and this side, we get an opposite weakness because those muscles just don't have to work as well. Now, how can we combat this? Well, changing positions throughout the day, not sitting and standing, if we're an extended period of time, whether you have an adjustable desk or just being able to get up and move around, change positions. Most oftentimes people will look at me and they probably think I'm pretty crazy. I don't sit still really well. I still have tight hip flexors. That's just from not being a great student, do as I say, not as I do, but just for whatever reason, as I work on them, they are better than they used to be when I was younger, and I didn't stretch them at all. But I also just get up and I move throughout the day, so I don't have to necessarily work as hard at the stretching, because I also then work my glutes, work the lower abdomen to make sure that they don't become an issue. If you're not working lower abdomen, not working glutes, and you're just relying on your hip flexors to be available to you, and loose, you're going to have some issues because they're going to tighten up. Then you're going to get this weakness. What happens then is sometimes we get this pelvic rotation, hamstring gets involved, you get leg pain down, on and on and on. So not very good. How we work this is we stretch the hip flexors, stretch the low back, strengthen the glutes, strengthen the lower abdomen. If you've got specific questions about those, you can send those to me. I do have some videos on hip flexor stretching. They're like 42 through 45, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but you can look earlier through the YouTube channel. They're on there. When you're looking for those, then you can look at some of the exercises that you can do for the glutes, some bridging exercises, hip extension. I've talked about those in the low back and stuff, but that's kind of also the hip flexor. But the hip flexor isn't the only thing that's involved, so the low back can get involved. So sometimes people will report with low back pain. If you're having low back pain and you're a runner and you go to see somebody, make sure they check your hip flexors. That's the downside of a lot of this stuff. A lot of people come in for low back pain, treat what's there, say, oh my gosh, it's low back pain, we'll treat the low back. They don't take a lot of time to stretch the hip flexors. They don't take a lot of time to work on the glutes. They focus right on the low back. Now, other thing is that if you're having some issues in the glute or down the leg, make sure that they check the low back for tightness, make sure they check the abdominals for weakness. You may need to strengthen the lower abdominals. So things like reversed curls, can be of a value. Taking a therapy ball, doing some reverse curls, doing some leg lifts. Those can be of value as well. Just make sure that you're not putting a whole lot of stress on the low back. If you have tight hip flexors, you want to stretch those out. So those are the 4 things you're going to want to look at if you do have some sort of symptoms. You want to look at the low back for flexibility, look at the hip flexors for flexibility, and look at lower abdomen, look at glutes for strength. Like I said, it could be one side versus the other. You'd be surprised at the number of times people will come in to see me and they have weakness just on one side. That's the side that's usually painful. So if you're having pain on just one side, check for that weakness and see where it goes. So that's it, episode 146, mesh tongue, lower cross syndrome. If you got questions specifically, let me know. Brian at company5k.com. Also check out runpainless.com. And as always, please share this with your friends, family, your training partners. Whatever you do, don't go hurting yourself to come back. But I do appreciate you always coming back. Check in with me again tomorrow. I'll see you then. Take care.